Wake up, buy here, pay here people. It's a beautiful day. Go grab yourself another cup of joe and say hello to Jim and Michelle Rhodes on the Buy Here, Pay Here morning show. Take it away, you two.
Good morning.
Hello from Oklahoma.
Yeah. Still here. We will be here probably for the next 3 weeks or so, but we'll see. 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah. Sounds like my mother finally got her surgery scheduled, so we kind of know what the schedule looks like a little bit more.
You know, we're so fluid. We're all, and it's so funny. Every time we talk to one of our colleagues or friends in the business or not in the business, it seems like it's like, so where are you today?
Yeah.
Like, well, we're here. And
it is a beautiful thing to be able to do what we do from wherever we are. So
it is. A couple of quick announcements that we have. Mr. Bill Elizondo will be joining us on Monday.
Some of you have heard of him.
I know.
He's
Bill on a drill.
Got a new effigy. Is that what they call it? An effigy?
So those of you guys who saw Bill on a drill, I was supposed to did we talk about the fact about my suitcase?
Probably, but not everybody listens every day. You always feel like everybody listens every day.
Yeah, sometimes I forget. That's it. And I think that's why when you get older and you have a larger group of friends and associates that, people will say, you've already told me that. It's like, I can't remember who I told.
Okay.
So in the bottom of my suitcase, as we were heading to FIADA, was our Bill on the drill that we introduced Bill on a drill
on our 100th
episode. And because those of you who know Bill know that he created Benny on a stick, and Benny is his counterpart as NIADA Dealer 20 groups. He's one of the moderators. And so, lots and lots of good laughs have been had about that. So I packed it at the bottom of my suitcase because, it has like the rigid end, and I just want to keep it really nice because we're going to give it to Benny so that Benny could, have his.
She means Ben Goodman.
Ben Goodman.
Yeah.
And, because we were gone for we knew we were going to be gone for a couple of months. So we packed super heavy. I swear to you, our luggage has puppies when we're traveling. Because when I go to repack when we're leaving somewhere, I'm like, how the heck did I Tetris all this stuff in my suitcase? And so, so I told Jim when we were packing to head to FIADA, I said, pack light, let's because we knew we were going to be picking up the car and then driving back. And so we, I packed everything and we were saying our last goodbyes and left and drove the 40 minutes to the airport. My daughter, lets us out. We give a hug and I'm kind of just doing a quick take. And I was like, oh my gosh, we did so great. This looks like, wait a second, where's my suitcase? And it had been left in the living room. And so Benny Bill on a drill was left in the living room.
So sad.
So was everything else other than what I was wearing.
Yeah.
So luckily
that part was sad too.
That part was sad. Luckily, we had a storage unit that I had a whole bunch of stuff in from when we packed up shop. So I could go through boxes of like, these are not my favorite clothes because I took all of those. So long story short, Bill on a drill is muffled at the bottom of my suitcase. And so as soon as we get back to Utah, Benny, you're going to see that. Yeah. It'll be coming to you. So Bill is going to be joining us Monday. That was not a Reader's Digest thing about sorry guys.
You're not a Reader's Digest.
I've never been. Also next week on Tuesday, is not next week, the week after next, on the 31st, on Tuesday, we are doing our next webinar. We do a monthly webinar. Last month was on converting more leads into appointments. That can be found right now in BHPHinstitute.com. And so we have the next one coming up, and it is on it's kind of
messaging. It's like telling you how to tell a compelling story in your marketing. So it was tough to come up with the right title for that because there's a lot of things wrapped into this. But basically, we're trying to help dealers tell a story that will be compelling and draw customers in more so than selling used cars. So we'll talk about that.
That's coming up. And
Troy Shear from NIADA.
Troy Shear and our CEO, Dave Murray, and both of them have a wealth of experience in the marketing world.
Right.
And, I don't know very many buyer payer dealers that we've talked to that have experience in a professional way for marketing and branding and all of those kind of things. So any little bits that we can help with being able to dial in our message and be able to attract people and make sure that people understand who you are.
Right.
So that's what we're going to be doing.
So time to bring in our guest. We promised
let's talk about the topic.
Yeah, we promised our folks when we shared the podcast this morning, the announcement went out that we were going to talk shop. We're going to literally talk shop and talk service departments. And doing that, I reached out just last night to a dealer that we've not met. We just met him a few minutes ago before we put him backstage for the show. And he's a dealer in Central Florida, North Central. And we had some conversation on Facebook around this podcast that we recorded called Tote the Note. And we had Brent Carmichael on there, and we took on, the question of, should I have a service department? Well, Rich Pratt, the dealer from North Central Florida, chimed in, and we had a conversation. So let's bring Rich in. Yeah. So welcome, Rich.
Good morning, Rich.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
So those that are involved, our broadcast, by the way, Rich, goes out to LinkedIn and YouTube. So there may be a few folks listening who aren't involved in those buy here, pay here groups that we're all part of. But I think most of the folks that are part of the either BHP Success Group or BH Boardroom, they've seen Rich's name. He's like us. We're involved in the chats and involved in the conversation there because we all know it's a great resource. And so I just, and Rich's comments after we shared that most recent podcast with Brent Carmichael about service departments, Rich chimed in and I just said, Rich, you're exactly the kind of dealer that we think about when we record this kind of stuff, because we know dealers are out there fighting this fight, have difficult decisions to make around, should I invest in a service department? Do I want to bring on the people? There's a lot of tough things to think about. And I know that you just shared that you got a lot of value out of that. By the way, first, before I talk about service with you, I got to take a moment to acknowledge your service. I saw in your Facebook profile that you were a military veteran, and we're grateful for your service.
I appreciate you saying that. I had pretty easy service, to be honest with you, but yes, I'm a veteran. I appreciate you saying that.
The willingness to be available to call.
Right.
That means a lot. It's like you're a gatekeeper, you're a watcher, and I appreciate that.
Yep.
The military is a very good to me as far as everything that it taught me. So I got plenty out of my service as well.
Excellent. Good. Excellent. So now back to your service department. I know that you shared on the Facebook thread. I just read to Michelle some of the things you shared about your own experience. You currently, are in a facility that's kind of small and constricted, and you're trying to run service for both reconditioning cars and supporting customers after the sale, and you're in the process of building new ones. So maybe share a little bit first about kind of what you took away from that podcast that you saw with Brent Carmichael.
It's, as I was listening to it, every aspect you brought up applied directly to our operation. It was it's almost like you work here. And so like I said, I'm like, man, this is a very, very informed conversation, and it hit home in many, many different ways, and from all the challenges that everyone has, including the quality of car that we're even able to buy these days. The price is going up, and you say buying a car needs a little more reconditioning, etc. One thing I'm a big believer in is that the general automotive culture in America has changed a lot, even in our lifetimes.
Sure.
I come from a generation where a whole lot of people were interested in cars, and so it's not that I just think they were a lot more they had a lot more ability to keep their own car serviced and everything than maybe they do now, because the culture's shifting. The biggest thing people are worried about now is technology in their vehicles, and so we have a lot of good customers that are good people. They honestly just don't really know how to maintain their cars. And so, long story longer, that's kind of what I alluded to, is in my mind, from here on out, I don't think that that's going to change. I think that it's actually going to keep going that direction, in a direction where our customer base is going to, it may need, if a car needs brakes, they're going to have less ability to do that than maybe they ever have. I mean, I may be pessimistic, but I do truly believe that.
Yeah. Well, as it becomes more difficult for a trained shop person, a tech, to do it, then obviously it's going to become more and more difficult for just your regular consumer. So that makes sense. A lot of sense.
Yeah. We used to just recondition cars, and I'll bring an example, and it's probably been 6-8 years ago. A very good customer had her car for about 14, 15 months, comes in and says, look, I'm probably going to ask you to miss a payment because my vehicle needs $1,400 worth of brakes. And we're talking about a Dodge Durango. And I'm thinking, I don't know of a Dodge Durango that needs that much. Can you hand it to me? And she happily hands me this estimate from the big box,
Oh,
automotive shop. Nothing against the big box automotive shops, but they're taught to upsell. And they literally wanted to replace the brake system on this Dodge Durango, every single solitary piece. And I'm like, well, we'll carve out a little time to maybe put on a lift and see what we see. And the car needed brake rotors and pads, and we were able to get her along, and she was happy, and we were happy, and we did it in a way that we didn't lose money. And I just, in my opinion, I don't see that situation changing anymore as society goes on. I mean, younger people honestly just don't have the ability to service their cars anymore. I'm not saying that we keep it going for them, but even as small as we are, it seems like that situation comes up all the time. Well, we have a service department, so maybe there's an issue that our customer has that is in their mind a major issue, and for us, it's literally a coil pack in 10 minutes. If you see what I'm saying, that's the advantage to me.
Sure. That's one of many advantages. I got to tell you, Jared Halstead from Arizona, who also is, by the way, is a member of the National Board of Directors for NIDA. He's dealing with the same stuff. He's a long time dealer, and he's out there, chiming in saying, "Look, I got the same problem as you got.
yeah.
We're all kind of fighting the same fight." And of course, cost of cars, have jumped up, in an unprecedented way. We've seen car prices creep up in the 20 plus years I've been around it. But, obviously in recent years, it's been drastic. The bottleneck has been a problem. So I think the other thing that I'm seeing dealers do is, they're taking on more body work. They're trying to bring body work in-house and some of that kind of stuff that we didn't maybe used to do. And so there's just a lot of adjustments. So I think it was important. And Brent obviously is Brent Carmichael, in the podcast is really, experienced, a former dealer himself and multi-store operation. And now, many years of 15 years now with NCM moderating 20 groups. So he's a guy who knows this stuff, more so than I do. We see it through our own clients' experience. Michelle and I tend to work more on the, front end operational side of their business, but obviously service impacts all parts of the business in the way that So yeah, I just thought it was important. So your decision, you shared with me in the comments that you were in the process of building a new shop. Is that just for the purposes of repairs?
Yeah, it's for the reconditioning to begin with and repairs. I mean, we're going to keep what we have now, which, like I said, is similar to what I see in my market as far as facilities. I mean, it's for repairs. It's to also try to attract the higher end techs that I'm intending for it to be climate controlled and et cetera. But yes, it's an investment that we're making with the thought that that's going to become a more important part of our operation. And I don't really have any aspirations of doing quote outside work or anything like that. You were talking earlier about the front end and but how being the mechanical side of the car has as much to do with that as anything. I mean, I think every single buy here, pay here dealer knows what it's like to call Mrs. Jones for her payment. And she said, Miss Jones, you missed your payment. And well, my car's doing this and my car's doing that. And it becomes a little bit of a thing for them to think they can fall back on. And we're like, well, ma'am, if you bring it in, we'll be glad to take a look at it. But so basically, yes, reconditioning first. That's obviously it's the restriction for everybody's business. It certainly is for mine. I can sell about every car I can recondition. I think everybody's probably in that boat from what I see. But we also have a certain amount of time that we carve out to try to help our customers along when they have a problem or whatnot.
Right. Yeah. So there's certain metrics that you look at, certain numbers that you try to keep an eye on, or what are things you pay attention to in terms of performance in your service department?
Honestly, my goal again is probably right along the lines of what you guys were talking about the other day, 7-8 hours per car. I don't know if that's realistic.
Yeah.
That's kind of per person. There's times I think we were able to do that. I think that in the good days, that's where I was at. I'm beyond that now in our new environment between you and I.
Okay.
But it's for all the reasons you talk about. number one is we're taking on some things maybe we wouldn't take on, whether it's a car that I bought that needed a little more, or honestly, I know I'm going on a little tangent, but we're recycling more repos than we used to repo. I mean, than we used to recycle. We're reconditioning more of our repo. Before, when it was easy to go get cars, well, obviously a repo comes in, needs a lot of reconditioning. I just send it to the auction. I'll go get a nice one for a little bit more money. Now you can't find that nice one as much. So yes, my metric is to try to, we set aside Fridays for customer service, honestly. So we're a small operation.
Yeah.
But that leaves 4 days a week for us to get a car per person reconditioned and put up front. I'd like to say that we achieved that. I'm gonna be honest and say it's not realistic right now for us. I don't know what everyone else is experiencing. Right. But that's it. But anyone that, you know how that goes. You're working on a car, and next thing you know is there's a part that it needs that we weren't anticipating. And now we call the dealer, that part needs to be back ordered, and so it's same challenge as everybody, honestly.
Yeah. Those are tough things. Like, that's why we brought the conversation forward. Did you have something, Michelle, you wanted to ask?
No, I'm taking I'm just writing some notes down on, all like the time you're spending on cars and things like that. But one of the things that, can it go back just a little bit, which I think is interesting to me. You in the podcast that you did with Brent, it was like, what do we do to attract people? And, what are we doing to keep them there? And we spoke just briefly before the broadcast, and Rich, you mentioned, that you're building this new place because people want something that is out of the elements. And I was like, Rich, you live in Florida.
Yeah.
And that's got to be, it's a thing then, even if for Texas and Florida, that they want to be out of the elements.
Absolutely. The new car stores are providing that. Some of the independent shops are beginning to provide that. Again, things change. People's expectations in their workplace change. So that's, honestly, let's face it. Working on cars is an unpleasant experience. If you're in the air conditioning, if you're out in the Florida heat or rain, it's extremely unpleasant. And so I don't blame anyone for feeling that way. And so putting myself in their shoes, and again, it's, for the good of the business, it's to attract quality employees. I know that one thing that I do here that I think allows our type of business with a technician to separate themselves. For me, we talk about the metrics of expectations of, how much to get done. Maybe let's just say, for instance, that it is one reconditioned car per work shift per technician. It's pretty unrealistic for me, but for the sake of conversation, we'll say that's what it is. Honestly, if I have a technician that's just reconditioning my cars, if he chooses to come in at 6 o'clock in the morning and not take a lunch and leave at 2, and he performs the work that I need him to perform, great. If he decides to come in at 10 o'clock and take off at 6 o'clock, if you see where I'm going. And one thing that I do, and it's not like the guy can just do whatever he wants, but I try to be very flexible with someone's hours. In other words, if they go to a regular shop and that shop opens at 8 o'clock, they have to be there at 8 o'clock. And if it closes at 6, they got to be there at 6. And that's just the way their operation operates. One thing that separates having a guy or a person that's reconditioning cars is there's a certain workload you expect every day. So look, if you come to work here, again, we're speaking of elements, sometimes we'll have guys that want to start earlier in the summer so they get off before it gets really hot outside, or maybe they have a lifestyle change. Maybe their wife got a different job and their daily routine completely changes up. And one thing I try to do is say, look, I can accommodate that. If something happens and you need to change your schedule, we can accommodate that, because realistically, we're not working around a schedule of people just bringing cars in at random. I need you to recondition X amount of cars per hour. And I don't know if that gets lost on other buy here or pay here, or even car dealers for that matter. But that's one thing that helped me retain some people, I think, over time.
Well, and that seems to be just in general with the workforce. is that especially after COVID, people want that flexibility of, whether it be if I have to come in work hours, do I have to, obviously with a shop, they have to come in.
Mhm.
We've seen too with a lot of dealers is that collectors are preferring to work from home 3 days
Mhm.
a week instead of, as long as everything's getting done
Right.
and it's getting done and at the same standard that you had before, that actually is, and what we're seeing is that culture plays a bigger part than paycheck.
Yeah. Couple
Um,
things to clarify on that. I think, first of all, to circle back to, people who haven't been there, we've been enough through Florida to know that it's common in smaller dealerships in Florida for their service department, as we're calling it, to be a carport in the back,
yeah.
maybe a couple of carports if they're
There.
lucky. And so we're trying to get out of the rain, which is common, but we are working out in the temperatures, outdoors, and sometimes, out from under the
Mhm.
carport if we're working on more than a couple cars at a time. So that's kind of what I'm hearing Rich describe, just to clarify for those who haven't seen it, because Rich, they don't work under carports in Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'll tell you, pretty much every dealer in my market is doing that. I mean,
Yeah.
we'll have our 2,400 square foot shop. When it's done, will be the best facility of all
Nice.
smaller independent dealers in my area. I'm not, but it's the truth. Literally, I've obviously like everyone I'm sure does. You drive around and you're looking at your competition, and you're looking at what kind of car they're selling, and you're looking at what kind of facility they have, and
Good.
what it looks like they're doing for reconditioning and everything like that. And yeah, it's super common. And you
Yeah.
know, we rented this place for about 5 years, and we bought it about 5 years ago. And so obviously, if someone's renting their place, then it makes a little bit of difference as well. But
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was a big part of us buying it, is that I could start making improvements.
Good.
And it's taken some time. We're getting there, and but it is a big investment. Like, we could be
Yeah.
doing other things with that money, I can assure you.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
Yeah.
it's a good investment in your business, I'm sure. I would also add that, I thought about what I heard Brent talk about. That survey came back. And so for those who didn't see that podcast yet, and I'll try to remember to share the link in the comments on this particular post so we can help people find their way to that podcast, because I remember when Brent shared that, is that the survey results came back and said that environment was high on the list of things
Mhm.
that were important to technicians. And I remember thinking at the time, do they mean, when they answer that survey, the physical environment, like the building they're in, air conditioned,
Mhm.
clean building, or do they also mean the
Or
whole work environment, atmosphere, people they work with? That wasn't clear to me. But I think while we can't all win on physical environment, air conditioned, clean, multi-bay shops like the franchise operators have, we can probably win on work atmosphere, like you talked about,
flexibility,
flexibility, and
that
we
kind of
can
stuff.
win in that area. So I think
Mhm.
we have to kind of decide as we meet techs and interview people, like, what's really important to them, because I have to believe that what you're talking about in terms of home life, uh, you know, if you're in an air conditioned shop, but your home life sucks,
right. Yeah.
you know what I mean? Then
Yeah.
I think there's something to be considered there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And like I said, I feel like that's one advantage that we can provide that probably really
Absolutely.
a shop, even a service department at the new car store cannot. When,
Right.
especially specifically when we're asking someone to recondition a car, and that, I guess that could apply to a detailer as well.
Yeah.
Look, in our mind, a detailer is going to be able to produce X amount of cars a day, and look, if you come to work for me, we can change your schedule at any time to accommodate any change you have or anything like that. And
Yeah.
yes, that's when you talk about the environment, physical environment, or as opposed, I'll tell you, I had a guy that worked for me for a long time, and he worked at the new car. He came in with his resume, and we're a small place, and he gives me his resume, and it's all new car store stuff. It's Ford and Chrysler, and he's certified and all this stuff, and he's got all this experience. And I actually looked across and I said, I'm going to be honest with you. If you've got all this new car store experience, why are you applying here? And his answer to me was, well, I don't want to deal with the politics.
Ah,
Ah.
And I ended up hiring him. And as I got to know him, I understood exactly more what kind of person he was. And he worked great for us, believe me.
mhm.
But again, it's when in our business, specifically on the reconditioning side, if you whether it be physically working on cars, detailing, or whatever, we need you to perform a task to this car, and we need you to perform this amount of work per hour or per day, work day in our mind. And we can assign these tasks to you. You don't have to deal with the service writer. You don't have to fight over the good and bad jobs. I mean, all the stuff that goes on that probably a lot of people are familiar with in the new car store, stuff like that. And we talk about environment, and that's part of the environment, where we do here. Our guys have their own dedicated work area that they go to every day. They don't have to share with anybody else. They have their, and I can see that they really appreciate that compared to maybe, I don't know, a new car service department where this guy and that guy are overstepping each other and all the stuff that goes on. So, to me, I've always kind of thought about how I could separate myself from them in order to attract quality employees, but it's still a challenge.
Yeah. And I would say it's another one of those things, Rich, where the world is changing. And if we ignore that, because what we're seeing in a post-COVID environment, people figured out in COVID that there are things that are more important sometimes than the actual paycheck, or things in addition to the actual paycheck. So I think as employers, and certainly in our service departments, which are really important area. And, Brent said, if there was one department, actually said there were two departments in my business that I'd be willing to be overstaffed. One was in service and the other was in collections, he said. So, again, I would invite people to watch that episode because Brent shared a lot of really valuable information there. And I know Rich told us before we started the podcast this morning that he actually shared it with some of his people just so they could be assured that you guys aren't alone, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. That's a great podcast, and it was hit home with me. Like I said, I'm listening to it, and you guys are bringing up different aspects of service and how things are changing, and I'm raising my hand the whole time. That's me. You're literally talking about my place, no question, and that's that's why it hit home. And again, it was comforting to know that I'm not alone, because it's easy to feel alone in your struggles every day. And it's this, everything has got more difficult.
Yeah.
And so you feel like, man, am I doing this right? And everything like that. And then you guys had that podcast, and it's like, well, it feels good not to be alone in my struggle. And you go back to talking about how important service is. I happen to believe that a high percentage of drama that happens at a car lot is a mechanical issue. In other words, theoretically, let's just say in a perfect world, we could sell a car to someone that we knew would never break. How much easier would our lives be in a buy here, pay here operation? Realistically, sure. Tremendously.
Oh yeah.
And so there, I don't think that it could be understated how important, like when we recondition a car, maybe somebody says, "Oh, that's great. You're really looking out for the customer." And we are. Please, I never want to sell a bad car to a person. As a human being. That's just not me.
Right.
But truthfully, we're trying to bulletproof them. I mean, if a car leaves your lot with an oil leak, guess what's going to happen? It's going to run out of oil, because the customers that, I'm not trying to knock the customer, but I think everyone will agree, we're not, the car's going to run out of oil if you let it leave with an oil leak. So, again, I can't understate my opinion on how important service is and how it's going to become more important from here. I don't think that it's going to get less important by any stretch.
Well, and kind of to underline what you said, you described earlier when we talked about the thing about the brakes on that Durango. It's like, some, you can try to bulletproof the car, but there's still going to be some maintenance, and even the maintenance stuff is a setback for the customer. So we kind of got to be prepared to support that along the way. And I hear that you're prepared to do exactly that.
Well, I mean, she's a great customer, great person. On the office side of things, never a problem with payment, never a problem with attitude, never a problem with insurance. And when her brakes started grinding, unlike some other people, she didn't just drive straight to me and say, "My brakes are grinding." She decided, I'm going to go to the big box store on the big highway in town and see what it is. And of course they said, "Well, you need every single aspect of brakes." And it's just like a strong example, in my opinion, of like how we can take what's a huge problem for the customer and technically with the right facilities and personnel end up being a very small problem for us.
Yeah.
And the motivation is to keep that customer going, obviously, number one.
Sure.
Number two, she's not done anything wrong whatsoever. But number three, obviously, next thing you know is someone signing in on a car and they say, by God, Mrs. Jones told me you guys are the greatest. And so it does reflect the sales 1,000,000%.
Absolutely.
Good point.
1,000,000%.
Absolutely.
Well,
And that's setting that culture that, you
Yeah.
know, what is right now your brand is we're going to make sure that you're treated right and that we're going to get you taken care of and
I would
referrals
just
are
share with you, you know, you
powerful.
said you found the podcast information comforting. It's comforting to me to hear a dealer like you reinvesting in Buy Here, Pay Here. You're committed to your business. You're committed to your customers. And so
Mhm.
that's comforting for me.
Well, it's good to hear. You guys have great information, both on your podcast, on the Facebook pages. They're very valuable. It's something that even if I'm not chiming in on, I pay close attention to, and it's an invaluable resource. And yeah, it takes a lot. It's I don't. There's this business is not for the faint-hearted.
Yeah.
And you know, it's funny because I talk about how difficult the technician's job is, which it really is. It's not a pleasant job, but you know, it's like, is collections pleasant necessarily? You know, with the
Right.
exception of buying cars and selling them, those are both pleasant experiences for me. But everything that it takes to do that is can be challenging, and so it's just comforting to say, well, um, you know, I feel like I'm so challenged. Like you bring up COVID and the change and culture and employee culture and all that has hit me hard to the point at times where again I'm questioning myself, and then the information that I get from you guys says, well, you know what, we all deal with this. There's no free lunch in life. You know, we all have the same challenges, and it's great to see how other people approach that, and it's valuable.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much. So I
Well, that sounds
appreciate
like
that.
a good place to wrap up. I just would say, you know,
Yeah.
Rich, we jokingly said, you know, we're out there in Facebook all the time. You folks must get tired of all the notifications from Jim and Michelle 3 times a week. I said, that's why we have an unfollow button. You can always unfollow
Yeah.
at
Please
any point in
don't,
time.
but
So,
you know,
yeah,
we get it.
I mean, we won't cry for long, but yeah, just that we're trying our best to bring information that we know you guys need.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you having me. I hope I was able to, you know,
Add to the conversation.
add to the conversation a little bit. I think that a shop is probably almost necessary. Just that's just me, but it's definitely a side of the operation that interests me greatly, and add to it.
Hey, Jared, it's Rich, not Chris.
Yeah.
It's kind of like all of the letters almost, but not. That's meant for you from Jared.
Yeah. Look forward to introducing you to one day.
Yes.
Nice.
Absolutely. All right. Well, have yourself a great
You too.
Friday, and we really, really appreciate you you joining us today. So
hope to see you in Central Florida.
If you want to hold back for just a minute, and we'll be popping on once we go off the air, unless you need to go ahead and go. Okay.
Oh, I'm good. I enjoyed it, and thanks for having me.
You're welcome. We'll talk to you in a bit. Bye.
Bye.
All right.
So fun. I love this about the morning show. I reached out to Rich last night, never met him, said, hey, how would you feel about being on the morning show? Sure. So here we bring somebody from a fresh conversation. And so it's one of the things I really enjoy.
Absolutely. It's and he gets emotional every time. It's like there's something that really hits close to home, and
I've told people, I said, I'm the guy who I don't just cry at the sad movies, I cry at the commercials for the sad movies. Like I'm just the emotions are really close to the surface
horses
for me,
with puppies.
Oh yeah, no, don't do it to me.
All of that kind of stuff. Hey guys, appreciate everyone listening in. Again on Monday we have Mr. Bill Elizondo is going to be joining us, and thanks George for
thanks, George. Appreciate you tuning in.
And we always can count on
Karen
a couple
from
of those.
North Carolina was here. Thanks for joining in.
One other thing I just wanted to let you all know, and it's kind of like a little teaser coming up. Something that we are working on outside of the podcast is we are working directly with NIADA to do something that we've talked about. We've done it with some of our personal clients, but we're going to take this on a much bigger scale, because we believe that what we're doing with this is going to be highly valuable. And so we've talked before about doing customer surveys where you're asking about their motivations, why they chose you, what they were looking for. Was this a down payment, or was this a financing? Was this a car? All these different little pieces that we we found a lot of value in asking customers. So we're working with NIADA for a survey that's going to be going out. And so there's going to be a 2-level survey. We're going to be sending out a survey to dealers. That's just going to be really quick to everyone in NIADA to find out, one, are you a buy here, pay here? How much buy here, pay here do you do? And just a couple of things like that. And to find out if they want to include their dealership in this survey that we're going to be doing nationally. And so there will be some prizes or for the customers that, hey, if you do this, you get entered into a thing. And we're not asking the dealers to put up anything because we actually have a vendor that's willing to help with that. And so we've been pulling that together, looking really forward to that piece, be watching for that, hoping, sometime within the next 3-4 weeks that we are it's out there. So we want you to be watching.
Watch for that.
Watch for that. If you are not a member of NIADA or your state organization, and
why not? What?
That's the first question.
You be a member?
The second question is, if you would still like to participate, we'll let you know, and we'll be doing a lot of announcing and just letting you know where we're at with that, because we would love to have people regardless of whether or not they're in NIADA. So so be watching for that, or looking forward to that.
When that comes, if you'll give us 90 seconds, we think we can give you back something really valuable. So
absolutely,
take the time to do that survey for us.
All right, so have a great day. Thanks for joining us here from Guyman, Oklahoma, and we will see you all on Monday.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks.